Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Todd Blyleven. Todd played professional baseball. After playing professional baseball, Todd worked as a scout for the Major League Baseball organization for teams including Los Angeles Angels and Colorado Rockies. Todd moved on to creating an app called the Scout Hub. More recently, Todd has launched the organization Walking Tall. You can find Todd by going to his website, thescouthub.com, or by emailing him at todd.blyleven@gmail.com. Hello, Todd. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Hello, Olivia. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
I'm so excited to get to talk about multiple different aspects of your story and your life. There'll be moments of conversation here today that are fun and lighthearted in the beginning, moments of in-depth conversation and heartfelt stories that will also get told that not many people have had the experiences to have. So I want to dive right into it. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Todd Blyleven?
Well, I think success, on a daily level is really just having an understanding of what makes you happy, in your life. And I think we struggle with that a lot as people, always trying to achieve things that maybe aren't giving us the daily satisfaction or gratification of walking tall for ourselves, right? So success for me personally is it really defines the opportunity for me to walk tall for myself and my community and being a good person and just being able to put a smile on my face. And if I can do that, I had a successful day. So
I love how you talk about walking tall for yourself, as well as being able to put a smile, not just on your face, but other people's faces. And that to me is so important because you never know, like we'll discuss, the impact one person can have on so many different lives. Before we get too much into that side of things and walking tall and that journey, I want to quickly touch upon something some might say is cultivating within itself and what a lot of people want to hear stories about. And, you've had unbelievable experiences yourself and impactful moments in the journey that a lot of people never know it's going to happen to them. Your dad played professional baseball while you were growing up. Mm-hmm. So you were born into baseball world. It's through your blood. You ended up becoming part of MLB as well. But your dad is actually Bert Blyleven, who's part of the MLB Hall of Fame. What was it like growing up having a father not just play professional baseball, a sport you love too, but being part of those really impactful experiences and different experiences than a lot of other kids have, especially with a father that ended up being in the Hall of Fame?
I never took it for granted, and I always appreciated the opportunity when my dad would take me to the ballpark with him. And I got a chance to do that pretty much all the way up until my freshman year in high school. I mean, I did a lot of homeschooling. I bounced around all over the country between home to different schools. It wasn't easy on having, I'd say, normal friendships with kids my own age. My friends were Major League Baseball players. My uncles, my brothers, that's what they were considered. They took care of me. I know that, even when I was a baby, I was babysat by some Hall of Famers and their wives, and I ran around with a ball and a bat in my hand all the time. And so I was really, really fortunate. They took me in. I used to have, bright red hair and freckles on my face. And so my nickname was Tomato Face around the ballpark. And I remember just, the pure joy that I had, just being able to run around with my buddies. And of course there was work, I'd clean their shoes and do whatever I could, like hang help the clubhouse guys out with hang them jerseys up and things like that. But, you look at, I got a chance to be a part of 2 World Series in 1979 with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I was a young bat boy, I was little, and but I was running out on the field and grabbing those bats, and some of the bats were taller than me, and I'm running in and putting it away, and there was a player by the name of Willie Stargell, and he was one of the greatest players that the game has ever produced. And Willie used to hand out these gold stars to the Pirates for everyone that did something really good or exceptional in a game. And so at the end of the game, he used to give me this list of players with a number of stars that each player would receive. And I'd go into Willie's famous box of gold stars, and I'd tear off a star and I'd go and hand it to a player, and he'd put it up on his hat. And it was just so cool to be a part of all of it, to the 1987 World Series Minnesota Twins, when I got to be around guys like Kirby Puckett and Kent Herbeck. And, they were really big into wrestling. I was a big WWF guy, like when I was a kid. I think probably we all were, right? And so, I remember wrestlers would come into the clubhouse, and I'd watch some of the players get all dressed up in wrestling, costume, and they'd fake wrestle and do all these things. But it was so much fun. I never took it for granted. I learned so much about the game. And probably one of the biggest things as it applies to your podcast is I really learned what success meant to a star athlete. My dad was in the Hall of Fame, or is in the Hall of Fame. Watching him go through his daily grind of always trying to achieve his own success on the baseball field. A baseball player or a sports athlete, we define success by stats, right? If we won, we were successful. If we lost, we weren't successful. And so you see the end of a game celebration when the clubhouse is live, it's lively, you got good, you got good food anyways, but everybody's just more joyous around it. Where you lose, everything's silent. And so as a young kid, I knew that was not the time where I got to go run around and shake hands or, do funny things. I had to be very quiet. I'd get my meal. I'd sit down with my dad. We'd eat, we'd get dressed and leave the ballpark. And then you reset. The next day comes up and all right, let's go. Turn the music on. Let's get going. You're rocking and rolling. So you understand really quickly how the performance of your action defined whether or not your next 24 hours was going to be successful and how that made you feel. And that's tough because that transition into the normal world, that's not how it works. Those successful moments may not be defined for months and months of hard work and labor. And it's not a stat. Maybe it's a paycheck, or maybe it's just being able to put food on your table. And so that was really challenging for me to try to redefine what success meant to me after, living that lifestyle for so long.
And I think you brought up a lot of great points there. One being, it taught you at a very young age, what an environment of a high pressure environment can look like within a community. Baseball is very much, especially at that level, a family. Like you said, you grew up in an environment where these players were your friends. They were part of your family. You guys did a lot of things together. And how that at a young age shaped how you looked at success and defined success, especially within that world. But then also over time, when you saw the transition into a more professional, corporate level environment, how that success is defined differently. And for you, it's also amazing to hear the different stories and the memories you have, because a lot of people don't get those experiences and how it shaped you. But also, I think the important thing here too is when you talked about how your friends, because you were homeschooled, you're moving a lot, were not your friends your own age. A lot of that gets missed for a child who is part of a professional sports environment. We always talk about, you see players get moved from one team to the other, and the next day they're in a different city, but you sometimes forget about the toll that can play on a kid and their environment. For you, what was it like Like, did it even occur to you growing up at any point that, hey, I don't have friends my own age? This is a different situation.
Yeah, it did. It was probably around middle school, really. I mean, elementary school, you're just kind of going through the motions, right? And everybody would say like, "Oh, we saw your dad pitch," or we saw you on TV or whatever. Um, but it was really around middle school where I started to realize what the second handshake was all about. And I always refer to this as like when I go introduce myself to somebody and I'm Todd, I get the handshake. Hey, nice to meet you. When all of a sudden they find out I'm Todd Blyleven, son of or former professional player and major, then I get the second handshake. Oh, wow, it's nice to meet you. I'm like, I just met you. But now because like I've got a different status to my name or I'm a part of something different, now I get the second handshake, like is more meaningful based on my status and who I was or who my dad was to know me than before when I just met you for the first time. So I started realizing that I don't want to say a lot of my friends, but I had friends definitely that were friends with me just because of who I was. So yeah, it was challenging. But still, it didn't change the fact that I was going to go to the ballpark, after school was over when I was in school and I was going to go play around with all of my buddies. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun, and I had some good, childhood friends that I still talk with today. And those are the people that I think really appreciated who I was as a person, and not who my dad was.
And I want to touch upon that, and then we're going to dive into some other things. But as you said, you also then went and played professional baseball. You were a pitcher yourself, and I think what we all experience, no matter our environment, is at some point we realize some of our friends are not our true friends. Like you said, there would maybe some ulterior motives or friends with you because, you played professional baseball or who your dad was, which you probably also experienced still while playing ball with some of your teammates. For you, what was that like? And then what was it like playing as a pitcher professionally with your father, who was in the Hall of Fame? Was there that extra pressure that even some other professional baseball players wouldn't necessarily receive?
Oh, there definitely was. And, I embraced it. I didn't really, I think probably, I think anytime, I always tried to prove more like who I was as a person. I tried to make sure that I was polite to people, that I didn't brag about things. I learned that very quickly. Like I wanted to share stories of who I met. Like, oh my gosh, I just met Reggie Jackson yesterday and him and I were throwing the ball around in the outfield or whoever, right? And sometimes the more excited I would get and I would talk about the people that I had the opportunity to be around just because of who my dad was, it came off sometimes like, God, there goes Todd again. He's talking about all these people like Topper. So I didn't want to be that way. And it almost kind of made me backtrack. Like I was very quiet at times because I didn't want to brag, and tell those stories, even though that's who I was. And I was just happy and like excited. I still get really giddy over, if I get a chance to meet someone of importance, in the sporting, anything. I just think it's totally cool. It's respectful of what hard work that they've had, persevered through. I think it's just awesome. So I still get kind of like really giddy over it. But the fact that when I was playing, I would hear that's Bert Blyleven's son when I'm on the mound. That would make me try to throw harder. And when they would, I'd strike them out because I was all American. I was all state. I got a full ride to just about every college in the country. That's not, maybe the door opened. I'm sure it did most of the time because of who my dad was. But when I stepped on that field, I had to perform because even if I wasn't very good, then, hey, thanks for coming out. You're doing great, kid. Good job. And that coach can walk away saying, yeah, I saw Bert's kid pitch. But when I strike out 15 or I throw a no-hitter or I'm throwing 92 or 94 or whatever that mile per hour is, that's me doing it. And so I started to learn that more in pro ball. that I was the one, again, going back to stats, everybody's watching your stats. So my stats were pretty good when I played. So I feel like I did a good job regardless of who my dad was. But without my dad and without me having the opportunity to be around so many great players that opened up their world to me and taught me things like Nolan Ryan. I got a chance to throw a bullpen next to the famous Nolan Ryan. And he taught me, why he grunts so loud when he throws his changeup, and he taught me like the little intricacies, and I always appreciated any time that someone was going to give me advice. But yeah, definitely a lot of pressure, but I think I grabbed onto it the right way. I like to ride the wild horse sort of thing and grab the reins and let's go, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And I think that's important to remember. And sometimes we forget when we get so used to hearing, especially in an environment where you're connected to other people, for yourself, for example, for yourself with your father. Oh, whether it went one way or the other, it was Bert Blyleven. Like either I got to see his son play or like he has that skills because of his dad or that opportunity because of who his dad is. But like you said, you get to a point where that is an inevitable thing that comes out of people's mouths, no matter your situation or how you think or what you might believe in. And sometimes there's no way to take that control out of someone else's mind and shift their mind. But you have to decide, I'm not going to let that get to me. And I know I stand on the shoulders of other men or women because of the opportunities I've had. But at the end of the day, I perform the way I perform because of the things I learned and the things I bring to the table.
You're so right. And really when we look at our parents or anybody that we have as a mentor in our lives, especially growing up, if we don't take a look at what has made them successful, whether it's a banker or a guitar player or whatever that is, or famous podcaster, right? If you don't pay attention to what has made them successful and you try to apply that to your own life, then you're foolish, in my opinion. Like you should be paying attention to those things. And I think, yes, it's mom or dad, right? Or it's aunt and uncle or whoever it is. But pay attention to it. I always aspired to be a professional baseball player. That's what I always wanted to be. Or I was going to be a Marine, which my grandfather and my other they were military. Or I was going to be an officer. That's what I wanted to do in my life. Right? I never thought I'd be building sports technology and all kinds of other stuff that I do now. But I learned my hard work and my perseverance and how to struggle. Like get through your struggles with this never-ending kind of positive attitude and approach by my parents, so.
And I'm going to pivot us to next chapter of your life, something that, as you just brought up, if it wasn't for baseball, you might have gone into a section of the military or become a police officer. What a lot of people have now come to know you for is something along those lines for one moment in time. Now, before I go into that big moment, I want to just mention that for some people listening, this might hit really close to home. This might be hard to listen to the following next parts of the story, but they're so impactful of a lot of conversations and moments that people do need to talk about, that I just want to give the fair warning that this can be hard to listen to, but please take it in. You need to pause and start listening again at another point. Do that, but it's really important. Now, Todd, as a lot of people have come to know about mass shootings and the impact that sadly that has continued to grow in our country. What people knew of you was Bert Blyleven's son, Blyleven's son, a player yourself. One day changed all of that. One moment in time. And that moment in time was the Las Vegas mass shooting that occurred. I want to start off by talking about what was that moment like for you and that mindset as you being in Las Vegas and the shooting started to occur?
Well, first of all, I try to tell a very PG or G-rated version of this. So for all the listeners or you listening right now with your ear pods and stuff, I try not to be graphic. So just know that there's not going to be any triggers in terms of noises that you're going to hear right now. You know, going to Las Vegas, this was an event that we had been to multiple times as a couple, my wife and I, and we'd go and spend, tons of time with our nieces and nephews. They were younger, in their early 20s. I mean, heck, I think most of them spent their 21st birthday with us in Vegas. Vegas was always a place we'd go and just unwind like anyone else goes to Vegas. And it was a 3-day country concert. A lot of our favorite artists were playing. I'm a huge country guy. I love country music. Just probably being a sports guy, I don't know, whatever, but I love it. And so, we went to the first 2 days of this event and just had a blast. The venue itself is an outdoor venue. It's surrounded by casinos, on the west side of the venue. And security was generally pretty tight. It was a place that you felt pretty secure going into, just like any other outdoor concert or a carnival or a fair. They scanned you at the entrance, and so you kind of felt secure in the inside and whatnot. Anyways, this was a time in my life when you talk about success, right? And where I was mentally and personally, I was really struggling to try to find my own version of what success meant to me. I couldn't find it in the boardroom, even though I'd spent the last 10 years or whatever it was in the corporate setting, doing really well and having a lot of fun with it. My marriage was somewhat on the rocks at the time. We were really struggling there personally. And I think a lot of it was just on me trying to just define things. And all of a sudden, we're at this venue, and for 48 hours, we're completely carefree. Everything is just filled with love. I mean, you can't even describe how amazing of a time we were having. On the way to the venue, I'm in a bus limo that I paid because I won the night before. And so I'm like splurging. We've got all these people in the bus limo. We're headed to the event. And they got this pole in the middle, and I'm swinging around this pole and just having fun. And we get there, and we're listening to some music and we're dancing, and then the worst happens. You start to hear some popping sounds. You're not really sure what's going on, and all of a sudden now you're hearing machine gun fire. And at first you think maybe there's no way it's coming inside of the event because you're secure. You've got officers everywhere. You went through a metal detector. So like, how is that even happening? And this was before mass shootings really became publicized and we're having one almost every weekend now. It's sad. But once, the first round seemed to be very extended. And at first I thought it was a drive-by shooting on the right-hand side. We were usually really close to the stage. And this time we're about 15, 20 yards back. Normally we're right up against the stage because that's where all the girls like to be. And us guys like to hang out and have a couple beers watching all the girls dance and stuff and just having fun. But machine gun starts, you realize quickly there's something going on. Jason Aldean's still playing on the stage. By the time I turned to my right, turned back to my left, he had started to run off the stage. Lights go dark. I look off to my right. Officers that were standing in one location are now gone. And now you're starting to hear people get hit and start to hear the screams and the terror. And that's the scariest moment, right? And so that's when everything just changed. So we all dropped down. You got your loved ones in front of you. And luckily, I looked up to my right and I saw the muzzle flash from the weapon being fired down on us. And I told everybody to get up and run. We were sitting ducks and we were right in the line of fire. So we all jumped up and, you pull people up, pull your wife up, and you start to run. I wanted to get away from the gunfire as much as I could. The only coverage position I could see was a Budweiser booth about 30 to 40 yards away from us, running east away from the gunfire that was coming down on us. And, as you're running, and I've said this before, literally everything's behind you and you don't know if when you lift your boot off the ground, if it's going to set back down and you're going to feel it. And you don't know if that's the last moment. And so it's almost like every step that you take, it's resetting everything that you ever thought was important in your life. And it's washing it completely away and you're resetting everything. And what's most important, and what was most important to me in that moment was getting my wife out safely and getting back to my children. That was the most important part.
And you definitely did that. And I think you very eloquently went through those moments. But also what I loved about what you said towards the end was that every footstep you took was resetting what was important to you and what you thought was important. And sometimes those moments of not knowing what could happen, whether that's through an experience like this or just taking a leap of faith on something, can reset what is truly important to you, how you act in certain situations. And I always say, it's not about how you act or you're perceived in the moments when everyone's watching. It's what you do when no one is watching. And it's the characteristics you bring to the table when you don't know if you're going to be recognized for those actions. You don't know, and in this situation, if you will even be alive to live through the next moments. And as I said earlier, you kind of lived out being a police officer this day when this happened, because without hesitation, once you got your wife and your friends to a safe environment and you all got there, without hesitating, you did something a lot of people might not necessarily do. You turned around and ran back. You ran back for 8 hours to save as many people as you could, whether that was checking pulses, carrying individuals out on your back, being in a safety zone for you. Why do you think now, looking back, without thinking and without knowing if you'd even make it that far or, see your kids again, like you said, did you turn around and save so many people and kept going in those 8 hours?
When we first got out, and I realized we were in a safer place. Now, we thought we were under attack. So because of the acoustics, it sounded like there were more shooters than there was. So as I'm trying to still run and get my family to run north, away from everything, towards squad cars that were there for parking control, there was a gentleman that had carried a young woman out, and she was lifeless, and I went to help put her down with him. And in that very moment, the softness of her innocence, her skin, the loss of life just impacted me tremendously. And I knew at that moment that this was bigger than even my life. And I needed to go back. People were going to be hurting. And I had 2 legs and 2 arms and a strong body. And I wanted to go and do whatever I could, whether it was going to be putting my own life on the line. And one day, if I did fall that night, I would hope that my kids knew that I did something to try to help somebody in need, and that I lost my life for helping somebody. And I did it over and over and over. And what was so amazing in that night, and that was so tragic, obviously there was a lot of horrible, horrible things that were happening. But the inspirational part was that, after I ran in and grabbed the first woman and brought her out and I set her down and I went to turn around and get back up and go run back in. As I was running back in, a 5'0" blonde haired woman grabs me as she's running out and realizes, okay, she had her defining moment right then. And she grabs me as I'm going back in. She says, "What can I do to help?" I'm a trained ER trauma nurse. And I'm like, "Ma'am, you could put your hands on those women right there." There were 3 at the time and someone else that was injured. And she ends up building 3 makeshift triage centers throughout her 8 hours, saving hundreds of lives and organizing all the EMTs and all the off-duty people that came in and came back to help. She was like one of the main organizers to this whole thing. Talk about inspiration. And it just kept happening. Every time I would run in under extreme danger and adversity, I got shot at. I mean, multiple times. And you're exhausted and you can barely feel your body is just painful. I'm carrying everyone out over my shoulders and doing what I can. But every time that I came out, there was more people that were going back with me. Every time I would stand up and I'd see all the injured people on the street, there were more people on top of them. And so it was one motivated, like, inspiration every single time. And it was just power. And I didn't want to stop until finally at the end of the night, the 2 SWAT officers came up on me, and I had stuff all over me, of course, from people being injured. And one officer said, "Sir, you can stand down. We have this." And that's when I dropped to my knees and broke down. And the amount of support from everybody that was in that area that came up to me and put their hands on me and really helped me stand back up and kind of get my composure. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. The love that was put forth towards totally strangers, right? Nobody knew anybody. I didn't know anybody I carried out. I didn't know. Hey, you needed help. I'm going to help you. And that's what I tried to do.
And I think that has shown, as you and I have previously discussed as well, after that, you had moments of realization and trauma that came, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about, as we talk about impact and just trying to save as many people as you possibly can, and, first responders and military individuals see that and do that on a daily basis as part of their roles. But you did it without anything. And you have since had people reach out to you and tell you how you either helped them, a family member. And it ties back to what I said earlier. You never know how you're going to impact someone, whether it's today or down the line. And you brought that up as well, of, the impact you make can transcend not just today, but so far down the road. And what were those moments like for you as you've continued over time to have people reach out to you, whether you've helped them or someone they know survive that situation, how you've impacted them, or even through Walking Tall, which again we'll talk about in a minute, but help other people who've been through similar situations get through it in a healthy environment. How have those moments been like for you?
Well, I think, when you're going through that kind of what the hell just happened phase, and you're trying to really piece things together for yourself, at the time you're like, "Oh my gosh, I know I did a lot of good, but I really could have, my kids could have not had a father sitting right here," and all these moments, those emails, those direct messages, people reaching out and saying, "Hey, thank you so much for bringing me out. You got my friend out." I would always reply back with, "I'm just so happy that you're alive. I'm so happy that we all survived." And, you're just spreading as much love as you can in those messages. And then it kind of fades away, right? Well, it wasn't always glorious too. At one point, I had gotten 3 girls out, and one of them I had to carry over my shoulder. And was saying this. One of them was saying thank you for me saving their lives and getting them out. And I said, I'm really happy that the three of you are okay. And she said, well, our friend didn't make it. She didn't make it. A few hours later at the hospital, she passed. But know that she passed with people trying to help her. And we were there for her. And there was goodness that happened at the end of her life. It just didn't end on a turf field. And that, to me, that hit me super hard, because that was like the first one that I realized, other than the three that I obviously passed in my arms that night. But there were a couple others that, you find out just didn't make it through that tragic event. And that was really hard. So all the uplift, the people that were coming on and saying thank you, it kind of balanced it out. And then it brought it a little bit higher, right? It elevated, knowing, okay, I did good. I did what I was supposed to do for mankind, and just anybody that was injured. It's who I am. It's the fabric of of my being. And I was really honored to be able to do it. And I would do it 1,000 times more. So I get back to Dallas. I'm going to real quick. I get back to Dallas and I am a mess, right? It's 24 hours later, not even 24 hours. I think it was like 10 hours later. And I'm back to Dallas. I get in my truck and I get a phone call from a friend of my dad's, and he's former military combat. He says, listen, I've been where you're at. I'm a friend of your dad's. This is who I am. Here's what the next 72 hours is going to look like in your life. You're going to experience this, this, and this. And that ride home, I kept thinking about what this gentleman had just told me, and basically gave me a 72-hour survival guide to understanding what I was going to experience with my nightmares and my lack of speech, and why all these things were going to happen. And he really put everything in front of me. He saved my life. I truly believe that, because in those silent moments, after everything's over, is the scariest time. And so now fast forward to 2022 and July 4th, we have another mass shooting that's horrendous in Chicago. And I was reached out by a friend that was at that shooting and did some extraordinary things to help people survive. And he said, hey, my friend is struggling right now. This was a couple of days later. Can you call him or text him? Here's his number. So I reach out to this gentleman. His name's Chris. And I told him the exact same thing that I was told. And I gave him his 72-hour survival guide and told him he wasn't alone and that I'm here for him. And we've been like brothers ever since. He called back. He was approachable. He recognized that I was relatable to him, and that I, in good intentions, tried to really help him in a place that he was in his silent moment. And he spoke up and he cried and he was vulnerable with me. And I think it was because we shared a relatable feeling, but it opened up his world to accept conversation and someone to listen. And that was the other part. I just listened. When you have somebody that's got anything, any issue, right? It doesn't, you don't have to be a mass shooting, but anything, just listen. Like, it's amazing the power of listening on what you can achieve. So I've been, ever since that moment, we'll probably get into it. It's been a mission of mine to be more vulnerable and approachable in my life. And I'll probably end on this little topic here. I put a video out sharing my vulnerability and my love for just life in itself, and how I've been able to reset things in my own priorities. And a lot of my friends were like calling my wife going, is Todd okay? Like, what is going on with this guy? Like, he's talking about love and all this stuff. But hey, you know what? It's amazing when you open up and you're just more vulnerable. Like, I've checked off my tough box. I'm tough. Nobody's ever going to be able to call me, not tough. And we're all tough. Every time we wake up and we put our work clothes on or whatever, or we deal with our stuff, you're tough. But for some reason, this whole stigma of sharing or being vulnerable is a sign of weakness, and it's BS. It's strength. And we need to have more of that so we can all help each other get back to 100% of our own mental health. So that's where you're going to go into it.
I am.
That's where the next chapter went. Yeah.
I'm about to go into it, but I want to touch upon one thing that, you know, you said, and I think it's really important to recognize, and you and I, right before this call, this podcast, we're kind of starting to go into it. You know, we all have traumas in our life, and they can take different forms. It isn't necessarily being a part of a mass shooting. It isn't being, you know, being a first responder all the times and being on the front lines and seeing things and experiencing things that other people might not. It can be as simple as, you know, having relationships and going through something, and then in one moment of time that replays. And I think what we all have to be gracious with ourselves with, and transparent, like you started to talk about, is the fact that we all have a story. We all have experiences that we go through, and part of that makes us who we are today. But when something happens in our life that brings us back to that mind space, right? That mind space of, wow, I had these traumas and that's how I reacted to it. And now out of instinct, that's how I'm reacting to this situation that's happening. For me, for example, of what Todd and I were talking about for the listeners, is I had this wonderful man in my life that I've been seeing, who, because he listens to this podcast, I will not necessarily name his name because he might be listening right now, and I want to be respectful of him. But he was an amazing human being to me, and we had an amazing relationship and connection, and I'll always cherish those moments. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, and I don't know the reason, and maybe I will find out the reason, but we ended up starting not to communicate, and I just didn't hear from him. And I knew that was really not like him. And due to my own experiences of being the person who got a phone call when my sister got injured doing gymnastics, and my parents were unreachable. And so I had to be the one to try to reach them, to tell them their daughter was on the way to a level 1 trauma center with her coach. And then having some other unhealthy relationships where just like ghosting was a thing to get a reaction. But mainly coming from the fact of that moment in time when I was in high school, and they won't even tell me which of my siblings it was. So not knowing who it was, their status of level of okay, and then and then having to tell your own parent, your own sibling is in the ER, but you've no clue what's happening, isn't a great thing. And from that day forward, I've always left my phone on. I've always been available. If I deem someone isn't acting okay, I always touch in. But when someone goes MIA for some reason in any aspect of my life, I get this urge to just like, you know, keep texting until I find out. And so for me, I realized through this experience this past weekend, prior to when we were talking, and we talked this weekend, so this was already partly going through my mind of, I felt, and you and I had previous conversations about trauma. In that moment was the first time I knew my past trauma was coming up. You know, I've done it in past relationships. I'm like, this is who I am. Just be open and transparent. And to me, that was always me explaining it. In this moment in time, this person had given me no reason to, you know, think the worst or think the worst about him. And again, I do not in any case. And probably if he reaches out to me, to be honest, I'd take him back. But like, if we're telling the truth here. But I think in those 72 hours that occurred for me, I really realized that's something that, whether I was expecting it or not, was something that was unfolding in my mental state that I, you know, just always kind of played off. But sometimes, whether it's something small like that and you don't have necessarily the control, it's just something that's happening, you feel like you can't stop it. You have to go through with it until that person answers in my situation. But trauma can pop up in the weirdest times and in the weirdest situations. So always be gracious with yourself in moments like that, no matter what it is, to be like, okay, I know I might be going through something, but that's okay. This is who I am. It's part of my story that makes me who I am today. And to lead into that, I want to talk about walking tall. What for you made you start walking tall, and what do you hope to provide to others through walking tall?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you had a rough weekend. But the fact that you learned something new about yourself, I think, is really empowering, right? And you're going to take that into your future relationships and the next steps that you take in your life, knowing a little bit more about yourself and how you're wired. And if you're not happy with a certain wiring that's going on, then there's help. There's maybe someone that's has a relatable experience, and you can talk about those things if you're vulnerable and approachable, right? If you have accountability in knowing that, okay, this is who I am, I want to change this, then you can hopefully try to change that or offset that wiring a little bit. But I think that's amazing that you learned that about yourself. So the walking tall stuff for me, I was raised, no blood, no foul, raised tough. We played basketball games. You're in there elbowing each other, and everything's like jungle ball, right? And that mentality too really played a part into my own therapeutic journey. Suppress your emotions, don't let anything out. Even though I had these amazing people, I call them my rocks, that were there for support, they were also wired very similarly in that we were there. I could tell stories to them. I could reach out to them when stuff was going wrong. They were giving me advice on how to maybe relax myself, different strategies on how to separate mentally from where I was at in that dark moment. But the softness never came out, right? And so for me, learning how to try to walk tall again for myself, which is a phrase I always used, meant getting back up on my feet and be able to function in my life and be the good dad that I am and be a good husband and be a good person and get back to old Todd, right? Through that journey, though, especially learning through therapy and going through EMDR therapy, I opened up enough to go to therapy because I had major headaches. My words were always stumbling. I had PTSD. I had obviously what I experienced, I've got severe PTSD. So I had to learn how to not be in that moment anymore because I wanted something better for myself. I knew down the road, I'm not going to live through this, number one. And so not that I ever felt I never wanted to take my own life or anything else, thank God. But I was in a really bad place mentally, just unhappy with how my body was reacting. Plus, I had physical injuries. I tore my whole left shoulder up. I had to have reconstructive surgery on everything on my left side because I was lifting and pulling and running. I had 2 hernias. My hip is still all jacked up, from things. So I had like a lot of physical ailment stuff going on too. But I had a lot of friends tell me you need to go get help. I went and got help through my therapeutic journey because I found the right person. She was my angel. Like I could connect with her and we would take 1 minute of time. And like you learned about yourself, I was learning about how I was dealing with my trauma. Put me out of a mass shooting. I was just learning more about myself and I was able to process things. And then my faith in going to church really opened up more the softness side of me. And I think I always play 13 seconds of time in my mind of the worst moment in my life. And it happened on that night in October 1st, 2017. And when I go to compare where I'm at today with my drama and everything else that might be hitting me, what is that? Is it comparable to that 13 seconds? Because that person can't be around anymore. And she's not able to speak for herself. And so it's my job to now make sure that my life is balanced and I'm prioritizing what's drama-like, or what's super important to me, right? And if I want something changed, I'm going to go ahead and change it. So Walking Tall started with me and Chris Malazewski in Chicago, and he wanted to change. He wanted to do good with something that was horrible in our lives. And we have a doctor of psychology that got together with us, and she's amazing, Dr. Vanetta La Rosa. And the three of us are just sharing all this emotion. It's like this pool of just people talking about things. And you would never have thought, 5 years ago that I'd ever be doing this, but it's all about now really sharing your adversities in your life with somebody and allowing them to help lift you up and walk tall again for yourself. And that's my main mission, is really getting out and breaking the stigma of vulnerability and approachability. Last night, I had a conversation with a gentleman, tough guy. We start talking about, because he saw my hat. He goes, "What's Walking Tall?" So I said, it's all about sharing your moments of adversity, no matter what the trauma is, whatever that is, car accident, somebody yelled at you, and really just being vulnerable enough to be able to talk about it and share like how that hurts your feelings or why you're hurt or why you're down with somebody, and allow that person to become approachable enough to then listen and maybe offer some guidance, to what they related to. And all of a sudden now you're walking away from the conversation, which we did. He's like, "Man, I felt really good. Like, I've never really been open that way, So a conversation starts everything, right? It really does. Women do it way more than guys do, like way more of an open book. So for men, we need to really embrace that. It's not weak. That's my big message. Like, it's walking tall, baby. It's let's go. Get your boots on the ground, lift yourself up, pin your shoulders back, and be tall in your life and be happy. And, whether you're struggling adversity to adversity, and maybe it's financial, maybe you're in a bad relationship, maybe you're just in a dark place. There's someone there that has gone through that. They're not going to experience it the way you do, but they will listen. And you just got to find those people, right? Find your rocks, and you're not alone. So that's what Walking Tall is all about.
And I love that. And I think it's so important to realize just to be approachable and listen can help someone more than you can even know. And you might never know, but it could make a big difference in someone's life. Todd, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
So through the Walking Tall side, we have a website called the walkingtallmovement.com. You can reach us there. You can reach us through info@walkingtall.com. On the Scout side, we didn't really go into the sports side. I own a sports technology company. That's the scouthub.com. You can reach us at info@thescouthub.com. So info at both organizations. But we're there. Walking Tall is really just building on a culture right now, and a motto of we got some apparel and things like that. A lot of the proceeds go back to certain organizations. We helped a young boy that was in a mass shooting. Unfortunately, he's paralyzed. We're helping through a huge group of people help fund the renovations of their home to give this boy a chance to really have a happy life. So we're doing things like that through our movement, but we're really just getting started. So, come and join us and walk tall for yourself. But I do keynote speaking too now, so I'm going out and spreading my message, and it's pretty interesting because I've got the sports background to obviously the experience in Vegas, and it really opens hearts. And I think that's my calling, is to try to spread my story, to open up the mind, to then hopefully reset it a little bit as I take your heart out and put it back in your chest. And maybe it's just got a little bit more love sprinkled on it, so.
And we could all use more love in our lives.
That's right. Yep.
Thank you, Todd, for all of your insight today. A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation is performance of your actions get defined how you define them. Whether that's an immediate return and right away, or it's long-term. How do you define your actions and your performance that comes from those actions? As well as sometimes people can think you're bragging, and sometimes we take a step back inherently and don't want to tell our story because you don't want it to be perceived the wrong way. However, like Todd has said, it's really important to be that listen and be there without judgment. Sometimes we all say things the way we don't mean for them to be said, but an open line of communication could really open perspectives, can open, the ability to feel in a different way, look at ideas differently, look at situations differently. And once you get to know a person, you can learn whether they're truly trying to be braggy or it's just their situation and they're super excited, like Todd said. Another great takeaway from today's conversation is the fact that trauma can come up at any point, and we have to identify our trauma and help others by being those listening ears and being approachable to have them feel like they can talk about their trauma and work on that as well. And that might not look the same for everyone. It can be perceived very differently. And you might not know someone's reliving something unless you have the discussion or unless they share it. So be there and try to also, even if they don't say it, always keep an open mind, because you never truly know what someone is going through. As well as you, and Todd is a pure example of this. It is what you do when no one is looking, or you think no one is looking, that can define what you're really meant to be doing. And for Todd, that's walking tall, helping others walk tall and work through their different situations. And it's in those moments that you don't know what's going to be posted about, you don't know what people are going to say, but making that impact in different ways. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Todd Blyleven. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.
Thank you so much.